There's an opportunity here. There's an opening for this kind of politics to really work. I want it to work, and I want to make sure that all the choices we make over the next few months, moving towards a general, I want them to be good choices. Welcome to the Atlantic Current. I'm Tull from the Irish Politics Newsletter, and as always with my co-host Vince Martin from Wall Street and Maine. Vincent, that is Graham Platner being interviewed in June when he was the presumptive nominee for the Democratic nomination for the great US state of Maine for the Senate seat there. And just over a month later, he's out of the race, dropped like a hot snot, and he's gone.
Yeah, that good choices line. There were some very poor choices in the months since, but obviously many, many poor choices in the years leading up to the beginning of his campaign. We covered that in detail on Tuesday in part one. It was a wild and sordid story, dark, but fascinating. It's, as we said then, it's going to be referenced in American politics for a long time to come. Today, we wanted to wrap that story up from a couple angles, kind of what it means for National Democrats, what it tells us about National Democrats, the sordid story behind the sordid story, what the global left is trying to do. And I think, interestingly, I'm glad we took a couple days to bring him up. The sudden passing of Lindsey Graham, a Republican senator from South Carolina, offers an interesting counterpoint to Platner, an interesting perspective on this story. But I want to pick up to begin with where we left off in part one, which was a discussion about what a failure this is at the national level for the Democrats. I think I closed by saying half-jokingly that the Democrats now are hoping to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, which only came after they fed victory to a alligator, right? Mm-hmm. So this idea of the Democrats just not being able to get out of their own way, you have to have somebody at the national level who knew this stuff was coming. Because what we're talking about is not really like super-duper Watergate-level investigative journalism that took 6 months.
No, it's just,
right?
So you're putting the search bar, you're searching on Facebook.
Yeah. Oh, they found his Reddit post. How the do you not find somebody's Reddit post? Even I know how to do that. This is not a one-off for the National Democratic Party to just have huge failures. Again, Kamala in 2024 was a disaster. They put in a new head of the Democratic National Committee, whose name is Ken Martin. We are not related.
Oh, okay.
Well, better not been related because he's a dope. I don't. If we are related, I'm not telling anybody, or I'm changing my name. He is put in and he goes, oh, we're going to do an autopsy. We're going to look at what we did in 2024, and we're going to figure out everything that went wrong so we can find all our problems and find our weak spots and fix them and compete.
Oh, God.
Yeah. This autopsy is supposed to come in late 2025, in the fall. We're going to have it in the fall. Doesn't show up. It's in 2026. Everyone's like, hey, what's going on with that autopsy? It's coming. It's coming. It gets to May. He goes, we're not going to release it publicly. And everyone's like, excuse me? Like, you have people donating literally tens of $millions to your party that you lead, who are basically saying like, hey, man, I just gave you 8 figures. Can you explain how you plan to use this money? How you plan to get this turned around? You know, why when I gave you $25 million in 2024, I wound up with Donald Trump as my president? I don't think I got my money's worth. And he just shelves it. And everyone goes nuts. And he goes on like this mini media tour. He's trying to explain it. He just can't explain it. And then finally, the actual report gets leaked. And it is the most ridiculous thing. It is unfinished. It doesn't mention Israel and Gaza. It doesn't really mention much about the decision to replace Biden and when that happens. It evidently is just outsourced to somebody on a volunteer basis. This whole thing he'd been talking up for months was just like a sham almost. I mean, since Trump showed up, they've never had a response. They've had no coherent strategy. And it's just, you're at a decade plus now. And the question you always get when you travel, and I got it when we were on our vacation once or twice, how did Trump get reelected? There's a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is that the Democrats have just been so piss poor at the basic execution of being a political entity, at having any coherent strategy, of any brand, of any passion, of any motivation. Yeah, there are problems. As he said, it's a tough job with a big tent coalition. But Donald Trump has pulled it off. If you're in the Democrat higher up and you go, oh, we can't do that. Well, if Donald Trump can do it, you can do it. And if he can do it and you can't, then you need to go farm oysters yourself. Find something else to do. Find another line of work, man. But it's doable, particularly when you have an opposing candidate that you, in theory, should be able to coalesce your coalition around.
Now, a couple of observations there, Vincent, about what you said. Okay. Number one is the autopsy. It's something that's rolled out here with political parties time after every general election. Labour Party, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael. I don't. Sinn Féin are quite opaque. Nobody knows what they're at. But
there's a Sinn Féin autopsy joke, which I, under no circumstances, am ever going
let's not go there. Let's not go there. No way. We'd get cancelled for that somewhere. But
cancellation was not my concern.
Right. So well, you're over there. I'm over here. I might get a fun knock on.
Yeah, but I like visiting. We had such a nice time. I want to come back.
And what happens is with these autopsies is that they usually send out surveys to members about what went wrong, right?
Right.
And the surveys usually last about 30 minutes that you have to do online or whatever. It's always online actually now these days. But as one wit pointed out to me, any political survey that takes over 30 minutes to do, they actually don't want you to finish the survey. They don't want you to.
Yeah, right. That's
second of all, the Democrats remind me of Sinn Féin somewhat here, right?
Okay.
We have a deeply unpopular government. I think their approval rating is 30% or something, even if it's that high. So 70% of the people of Ireland think, or those who polled at least, say, the government is doing a terrible job, right? But Sinn Féin, the party leaders dropped 4 points in the last two polls, their popularity. They hover in around between 20-23%. I think at their high point at one stage, they were 33% in 2018 or 2019, I think, going that far back. And they can't capitalise because outside of, 2 or 3 senior frontbench people, Pearse Doherty, Mary Lou, Ona Bryn, they're probably the 3 most recognisable faces of the party. So you've got probably AOC in the States, the governor of California, and maybe, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, okay?
Yeah.
And outside the 4 of them, nobody knows what else is going on in, left-wing politics. And the same within Sinn Féin, outside of those 3 people that I just named, the rest of their backbench are so stupid, and I am stupid on levels that I haven't seen in many decades. I've never seen so much stupidity stalking the corridors of Leinster House in one political party. You'd be raising your eyebrows at the stupidity of the stuff that comes out of their mouths.
Right.
And they can't capitalise on how deeply unpopular this government is. And it's the same with the Democrats in the States. They can't capitalise on how deeply unpopular Trump is. There's a lot of mirroring going on there between the 2 elements. And I don't have a political scientific explanation for it. But, Sinn Féin should be riding high. They should be polling in around 30% at least. And they're not there. They're not there. Yeah. They're actually deeply unpopular. To say that they're hovering around 20-22%. Means 78% of the population don't want to touch these guys.
Yeah.
So what's going on there? I mean, I have an idea what's going on there, but we have libel laws in this country, so I can't.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Democrats, absolutely, they haven't been able to capitalize, and just bad execution, bad candidates. Though both those have been a big part of the problem. I do think people underestimate what an absolute tragedy it was for them to let Hillary run in 2016. They never understood. She never understood, which I get. It's hard to understand why why people don't like you, particularly for her, because I think some of that was irrational. But the party didn't understand how disliked she was. And I'll believe till the day I die, if they had just ran some no-name swing state senator in 2016, Trump would have lost pretty handily.
Yeah.
Trump won that election in 2016 because there was a decent number of people who disliked Trump and disliked Hillary Clinton and decided that they disliked Hillary Clinton more, which tells you something about how popular she was. But if you want to kind of give some grace, if you want to give a little bit of slack, as we would say, to the Democrats, I think there are 2 things that you would point to, and somewhat fairly. One is what you mentioned before, this idea of purity, this idea of a left, and particularly a far left, that's just decided that they don't want to make compromises anymore. One of the things out of all this craziness in the story, believe it or not, the thing that might have jumped out to me more than anything else was in that Journal interview with Moraff, the consultant who found Platner. And he was asked, don't you think it's a risk to run this guy? And he goes, well, we can't keep running these establishment candidates who have led our country off a cliff for the last 100 years. And I was like, how the hell are you a liberal? Like, we've talked about conservatives who believe that, that the country was peaked in 1958 and it's been all downhill ever since. I don't understand how you can look at the last 100 years as a liberal when the left, broadly speaking, in the United States has won battles starting with child labor and moving on to weekends and holidays and civil rights and gay rights and all, just eventual victory, not easy victories, not immediate victories, and in some cases not full victories, but victory after victory after victory for 100 years. And look at that, go, oh yeah, everything's gone to shit. That was such a striking thing to me. If that's your viewpoint of the country, I don't know how you can choose a winnable candidate. Most Americans don't believe that. There is that purity thing that the people on the left and there are the people who decide the primaries. They want a revolution. They want someone who's going to break things. This is what people said about Trump in 2015, of course. But I don't understand why Democrats, seeing a second term of Trump, why more of them don't go, you know what, man, we need to stop the purity test. We just got to win this election. Have a purity test in 2029. Can we actually be pragmatic and focused? And I do think that's the National Party has done a terrible job of pushing that narrative, but they just don't have any control. So I am sympathetic to that. And that is a global thing. People on the left want broken the way that people on the right did in 2015.
So I'm just thinking about the Republican Party there. They had no problem electing a guy with fascist tendencies that assaulted women. Darky,
no.
Well, so look, American politics is in desperate state of flux, and as American,
flux is not the word I would use.
Yeah, I know.
I thought you were going to different depression, horror, yes. Nightmare fuel.
Yes, and the way America goes, Europe follows usually. So yeah. I'm not casting a disapproving glance on the state of American politics when I know what's coming down the line in Irish politics as well.
Yeah. There is a story you can tell where Trump kicked off something in 2015 and it went around the world and then got back to the left wing of the U.S. politics like 10 years later.
Horseshoe theory.
Yeah, but global. Yeah, I don't know what a horseshoe the size of the globe is, but something like that. Yeah, but that same streak, we will accept and a lot of Platner supporters that we're going to accept the personal flaws because we need somebody who's going to break things. We need somebody who's going to be revolutionary. We're not doing incrementalism anymore, right? We need huge change. But the other thing I will say, the last thing to say about the Democrats in particular, which goes to my point about Marath talking about this horrible century where the country has gone off a cliff. They do have an intractable problem, which is not their fault, which is that it's really hard for them to be cool. It's really hard for them to be the party of people who want to rebel, of people who want to push back, precisely because they've won so many victories. If you're young, if you're in your teens or your early 20s and you think you're smarter than everybody and you think things need to change, or you want politicians or political commentators who are edgy, who are pushing boundaries, who are going to kind of be innovative, for my lifetime, that usually was the Democrats, because they had people who were pushing against social norms. They were pushing for gay rights, which was not a social norm when I was growing up. They were pushing for civil rights before that. They were pushing for environmental justice and all these sorts of things at a time when that was still far from consensus and kind of scoffed at. They had ways to inspire people because they could put a fight right in front of you. And when you're young in particular, and you have the energy and the desire to fight and to be unique and to do all that, that was an attractive proposition. They are kind of out of fights. Yes. And if you think about it, if you're 21 and you want something like that, nowadays you're going to go to the Republicans. You're going to go listen to Nick Fuentes or whoever it is. It's oddly easier for the Republicans now to inspire people, I think, because they are the party now that's actually pushing for dramatic change. That is something that I think is an underappreciated headwind for the Democrats. I do think we can give them a little credit for that.
The Democratic Party, all those things you were talking about there, gay rights, the environment, civil rights, there were trailblazers in that, and there's no more trails to take, is there?
As is often the case, I spoke for a minute and a half and you spoke for 8 seconds, and yours was maybe way more intelligent and insightful than mine.
Yes.
Appreciate that. Yeah, that's a perfect summation of what I was trying to get to. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And that's really a great way to transition to another point here. If there are no more trails to blaze, the left in the U.S., and I would imagine much of Europe as well, really has two choices. One is you turn to defense. To stretch the metaphor, you keep your blaze trails clear, right? There's a backlash in the Trump administration against a lot of Democratic wins on climate change, trans rights, even healthcare. If you're on the left, one avenue you can take is you just say, look, we need to stop or slow Trump. That's our first goal. If we do that, we will protect vulnerable people. We will protect the environment. We will protect the people who got better healthcare under Obamacare, the ACA, all that. The second path is just to say, well, yeah, we blazed all those trails. We just need to find more trails. And very clearly, the people behind Platner himself, believe that. And that split, I think, is a huge, huge debate, a critical debate within the Democratic Party right now, something that we're seeing in their primaries. Is there something similar to that in Ireland, the UK, and or Europe?
Okay. The problem with that is we've 27 different electoral systems in Europe. So you're going to get very differing shades of what's going on in the States to varying degrees. So I can speak for Ireland quite confidently. Okay. There's a backlash, and there has been a backlash for the last maybe 18 to 24 months against particularly trans rights and anything that's seen as, woke, God forbid, in inverted commas, all that kind of stuff. There's certain elements, grievance politics that you see on X and stuff like that. I don't think they're far right or far left anymore. It's the politics of grievance.
Right.
So, for example, the Labour Party and the Social Democrats and, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, they are not pushing certain agendas as much as they used to. Because like everything else, moderation in moderation.
Yeah.
Okay, if you push your society towards one issue or another issue, usually they will react in the other way towards you. That's always been the way in politics. The gay marriage thing was won by popular vote in Ireland. We won it. The country voted overwhelmingly by popular vote to legalise gay marriage. And that's seen as a fight that was well worth fighting for and well won fight. Only the really religious people and really kind of reactive or reactionary people are the people annoyed with it. But the trans rights issue has become a thing all over, not just the United States, but Europe, Ireland, England, everywhere. And that trail was seen to have been blazed at one stage. People are pushing back at it for lots of reasons,
Yeah.
But the reality of the situation is all that's left to fight for now at the moment is housing and healthcare. And that's the drum they've been beating non-stop in Ireland and around Europe. Housing, healthcare, jobs, backlash against the likes of data centres. That's where the next war is going to be on the left, is data centres and technology. Okay.
Yeah, we're seeing a little bit of that in the States.
But that's where the next war is coming from, Vincent. We'll do an episode on data centres maybe some stage, but that's where the next war is. I think technology is probably the last frontier for fights on the left. There's nowhere else left to fight. They're always going to be fighting about housing. There's always going to be fighting for more housing, more adequate housing, more better health care, better access to services. That's always going to be there. But the left are not just fighting for that as well. But centrist people are fighting for that. People on the centre right are fighting for that. That's not the left wing don't own that.
No,
Okay?
The American right is talking about that endlessly, and many people on the American right, including people like J.D. Vance, have explicitly tied illegal immigration to housing.
Yeah.
If you get all these people out, American citizens and legal immigrants will have more affordable housing and more options. So, yeah, no, they're not exclusive to the left. Politically, that's kind of the point. I think that is one of the big challenges for the Democratic Party here. And it's particularly a challenge in the framing that we laid out there, where we said, there's two paths. If you have these issues that are not exclusive to the left, and if you have these issues that just aren't as fiery, they don't have the same easily expressible moral character. Saying, we need home prices 15% cheaper just doesn't inspire the same passion as a sit-in at a Birmingham coffee shop. It is a different kind of fight. And I think that has really been one of the challenges for the establishment, for centrist Democrats, trying to fend off these people pushing from the left. And we talked in the part one about Platner and his consultants in particular saying, no, we can't do what the center has done because the center has kept losing. Now, I think the center has kept losing because they just keep doing stupid shit. I think you can misread that as a policy thing, because I don't think here the way to win national elections or to win an election in a place like Maine is to go for the left. I'm not buying that.
I think, Vincent, that's not just unique to the United States either. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so take for Sinn Féin, for example, right? They were a very left-wing party. They were they described themselves as Marxists.
Right.
Okay. In the 1980s, if you said to a Sinn Féin fellow, well, are you a centrist dad, or you a centre-right dad? He would tell you I'm a Marxist. Okay. And now they're solidly went from far left to centre left, and now they're kind of left wing populist, right wing populist, meeting somewhere around in the middle of the horseshoe. Nobody's quite sure what they are. They have an identity crisis now at the moment.
Yeah. They have a couple crises at the moment, from what I understand.
Yes, to do. We'll do an episode on Lynn Boylan, of course. They have an identity crisis. They don't know what they are anymore. Yeah. Going to the far left never works. Even in Ireland, even in a communist country like Ireland, Vincent, have, I think, 2 or 3 TDs that would describe themselves as very far left on the communist fringe, and it's 3 TDs out of 188.
Yeah.
So going to the left never works. But might work. Running to the centre sometimes works.
You would think, particularly against Donald Trump and the kind of candidates that Donald Trump nominates.
Yeah.
Now, it is a little different in the case of Platner, in the case of Maine, because the incumbent, the Republican incumbent, is a moderate. But that kind of gets to another point. In part one, I talked about my friend in Maine who's tied into politics there. And he is real. He does exist. That wasn't just like some thing I made up to put my own analysis in. But he reached out after listening to part one. And one of the points he made dovetails into what we're saying is that even aside from the allegations against Platner, there were Democrats in Maine who were getting pretty worried about him taking that lead in the poll, because their point was, even if he was a Boy Scout, a choir boy, whatever you want to say, he was taking the far left position on every single thing. And we talked about how Maine is a little bit of an unusual state, but another point my buddy made is it's a state where you just have to be moderate. That's what you need to win the race. And he was saying, there are some people there who are actually relieved that they might get a candidate who's better for the politics of Maine, because they were worried that Platner was too far left.
They were also probably afraid that, if this can happen in Maine, in a pretty diverse electoral state, it could pretty much happen anywhere.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
In all 50 different states, the Democratic Party could be torn asunder.
Yeah. And there are the other examples. There's one in Michigan, which is similar. They have a guy out on the left who's making people in the establishment worried that they're going to wind up losing a winnable race because they nominate somebody out on the fringe.
See, I'm going to tout the benefits of PRSTV Ireland's electoral system.
Yeah.
Okay, but when you have binary choices like that, you're always going to pick the kind of least worst off option. And political scientists will tell you people vote like that anyway. It don't matter what your electoral system. But when you're given a black and white choice, there's very little room for grey.
Yeah.
Okay. In Ireland's electoral system, you'll have constituencies, 3 or 4 seat constituencies, whatever the case may be. You might elect one headbanger, but you won't elect 3. So you're not given a binary choice. You maybe you can give a wink and a nod to the mad candidate and vote for the other 2 instead. That kind of way.
Right. This is all part of that dynamic of which way do you go? Do you go further left? We said the consultants, that's what they're saying. Look, we've lost to Trump. Trump got reelected. We need to do something different. We need to go further left. I'm skeptical. You have people in the Democratic Party going, oh yeah, we need Ocasio-Cortez as president. I can't even imagine how you could look at a national race and go, oh yeah, that's the one we need. I think what they miss too is right now, if you kind of talk to normal people who aren't doing what we're doing and analyzing politics, like they're just kind of exhausted by the whole thing. It's been 10 years of them having to think about politics all the time because politics is now part of family gatherings, right? The pro-Trump uncle and the anti-Trump aunt can't shut up. People just want like competence and quiet and just some level of normalcy. I think you see that in how Rubio and Vance are actually trying to position themselves right now, right? They are very obviously kind of have their eye on not going full Trump, on trying to be able to tack back to the middle. Putting someone who's going to get everybody pissed off on Facebook again, I think it's just a mistake. But it's a big part of the Democratic Party right now. We're going to see in the next couple months which side wins or at least takes the early lead because it's going to be a multi-year fight.
Yes, we're 2 years out from the next presidential election, Vincent, and you can see once the midterms and all that are done with, I think Trump is going to be a ghost of himself. They're going to ignore him, depending, of course, on the vagaries of the election itself, how controversial they'll be and all that kind of stuff. But yes, we're 2 years out, and I think maybe 18 to 12 months from now, we still might, the Democrats are still going to be tearing themselves apart. So
I think their primary is going to be, it's going to be something to see. Yeah.
It's a bloodbath. It's going to be a bloodbath.
The Democrats, I think, are looking at a scenario where they're going to have a lot of people running, and weird shit happens when a lot of people run. That's the story of Donald Trump. It's going to be a mess, and it'll be the first big battle in this war, I think, for the soul of the Democratic Party.
Right. Let's get back on piece there now, Vincent. Okay.
Yep.
Why did this story fade the way it did? And I don't know how the American justice system operates and all that, but the guy was essentially accused of being a rapist. And why is he not being led away in handcuffs?
I mean, the short answer is I really don't know. And part of the reason I don't know is because the story has just disappeared in a bizarre way. I mentioned this briefly in the part one. We're recording this 3 days after we recorded that. Everyone's just moved on. We had some on our Twitter account. We're like, oh, we did an episode on Graham Platner. It's like, everyone's moving on. What? Why? First of all, this is a crazy story. But second of all, to your point, publicly, by name, on camera, the woman, Jenny Rasico, said, yes, he raped me. Absolutely. This isn't some anonymously sourced allegation. I was trying to look it up. It is, I think, the most serious allegation against a national political candidate in my lifetime. There's an argument that the only worst one goes like in the 19th century. We had a president named Grover Cleveland, and they said that he raped a woman and he got her pregnant, and then after she had the kid, he had her committed to an insane asylum. And I think it's one of those stories that like historians are still debating as to what exactly happened and who did what, but. Yeah, this is an absolute 20-year in jail felony in America, what he's accused of. And I don't see very many people arguing in any kind of good faith that the accuser is making this up or is being dishonest. Now, Platner has denied it. Let's be clear about that. But no one around him is acting as if they believe his denial. No one in the entire Democratic Party structure, whether that's in Maine or across the country, is acting like that. As I understand it, the police don't need the accuser to start this process.
Okay.
It's worth reiterating. It's just stunning that this story has gone away. And as I said in part one, I think a big part of it is the fact that there were all these other allegations. People are less surprised that it wound up here. If Platner was married with 3 kids and nobody had any inkling and then the story came out, I think it would be a multi-week news cycle story. I think people would be out on the opinion shows asking where the police are. I think people would be calling for many, many more people to have resigned. Right. I think people would be out there calling for the resignation of Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or things like that. Or at the very least, they would be going, hey, withdrawing your endorsement. No. Like that's not enough. You campaigned for someone that we believe is a rapist.
Yeah.
There are absolutely worlds where this is a story that just leads the news cycle for weeks, even in the Trump era. It's strange. I don't know. I'm not sure what you're seeing or kind of how you see it from outside.
I'm just wondering, put to one side Platner, he will probably get arrested at some stage. There's no way he's going to be able to walk the streets indefinitely,
It's possible. I mean, I absolutely think it's possible. People are acting as if that's the outcome. I'm not seeing like legal writers come out and go, oh, here's the legal trouble Graham Platner's in. Everyone's just like, all right, man, go back to your oyster boat. We're done here.
Well, Vincent, I don't know the intricacies of the American legal system, but I have a fair idea if it was in Ireland, he'd be, in handcuffs in the back of the van by now, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
So, now, how about consequences for other people? How about consequences for the space monkeys and the moonbats, or the political consultants, as I like to call these people? Is there any fallout for these people?
There is a little bit, because they've kind of been dragged into the scandal. They've had their own mini scandals. We talked about David Moraff, who kind of kicked off the process of finding Platner and led his candidacy and stuff. As he's become famous, and I think even before kind of the final allegation around Platner, there was some reporting about him. But we've gotten reported in the last week or so that he was actually barred from a campaign in 2022 in Pennsylvania. Depending on the story, it was either because of sexual harassment / misconduct, or just for generally being a
okay,
or possibly both. Someone posted on X, a staffer for Pennsylvania Democrats posted that he was, quote, the most hated staffer in the entire region. So evidently he had really built up a reputation. And there were people within the Platner campaign who were very upset about how he acted. They thought he was a misogynist. There was a woman named Genevieve McDonald who resigned very early in the campaign. And my buddy in Maine kind of pointed that out to me. He was like, man, that looks like a canary in the coal mine, right? Doesn't it? That really looks like foreshadowing. And she promptly came out and started talking about the campaign later. And Morris Katz, one of the other consultants, threatened her for going public. Both of them look kind of like people, beyond the fact that they just didn't do their job vetting. Katz is, believe it or not, is still a key advisor to Mamdani, the mayor. He was kind of credited for his rise. So Mamdani's come out and said he's not going anywhere. But yeah, I think for Moraff in particular, this is going to be a pretty damaging episode for him, which, it's hard to have sympathy for him, particularly with the allegations about his behavior. And we talked to the first episode about the idea of having these upper class guys trying to find an authentic working class candidate to appeal to blue collar voters. I didn't realize how upper class they were. Moraff comes from like old money.
Right.
Yeah. His grandfather helped found Toys R Us, which is like, when I was growing up, that was the biggest toy chain in the country.
They were in Ireland at one stage. Yeah.
Oh, were they? Yeah, that seems actually, they were that kind of American company that would try and expand into Europe. And Katz is like, we'll post on our Substack. There's an article about his family history, which is just nuts. His grandfather was some famous libertine. His father is a famous playwright, evidently, who is the guy who discovered the body of actor Philip Seymour Hoffman after he overdosed. And the story about their backgrounds is quite wild. We joked about Moraff going to Yale Law School while he's running this anti-establishment campaign. They are old school, super urban, super elite upper class, which makes it more annoying and also more funny. They were in charge of this incredible organic grassroots campaign around a oyster farmer, right?
The left wing in Ireland are not all that similar. They're barristers and high-flying people and all manner of the great and good and high pillars of society, and thinking they know what's best for the working class man. You call them political consultants in Ireland, or in the United States. In Ireland, we call them special advisors.
Okay.
These political consultants, they're quite mercenary characters, aren't they? As opposed to, in Ireland, your special advisor is the person that would take a bullet for you in the morning.
A job with loyalty.
Yes, you have to have incredible levels of loyalty to make it up to special advisor level. You don't get there by coming from Trinity College Law School, plonking yourself down in the rougher environs of, Dublin or Cork cities. You have to work to be a special advisor. And these guys came in, barged in, have taken control of elements of the Democratic Party, and I don't think they're going to give it back willingly.
There's going to be a battle in consultants that echoes the battle that we talked about for the soul of the party. There are no doubt a lot of consultants in D.C. who have gone to their candidates over the last 2 weeks and said, you need me more than ever because look at these guys. Look at these lunatics.
Now, Vincent, getting away from one Graham and going to another Graham, Lindsey Graham, rest in peace, South Carolina senator. His sister has just been sworn in to take his seat. A friend of Ukraine, a friend of very stringent American foreign policy, not shy of waving a gun in another country's face. Metaphorical gun, of course.
Or a literal nuke. Yeah.
A nuke, yes, he's threatened to get nukes. He's been a friend to every tin pot pro-American dictator around the world over the years. And he's died very suddenly at the age of 71 last Saturday evening.
Yeah, Saturday.
Yeah. As per usual, spawned 1,000 conspiracy theories.
Of course.
But he was a friend of Ireland, believe it or not. And for some reason, I saw his mug popping up all over on politicians' Facebook pages and X pages and Instagram pages saying he was a great friend of Ireland. But he has a more checkered past in the United States, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think for sure. I'm glad we're only doing this a couple days after, because I think what I'll have to say is more interesting and also maybe a little bit more fair. We have talked so far about Graham on this podcast 3 times. The first time we talked about him was in our second episode, and I called him a curse word, as we say here, an unprintable word.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was a word that is quite popular in England. I was under the impression was similarly popular in Ireland.
No.
Yeah, you kind of said, "Oh no, that's not quite how that works." So,
as a man surrounded by women every day, it's not a word. But believe me.
Fair enough. So that did not make it to air. We talked about him quite a bit during the January 6th episode, which is episode 6. That entire story. I called him a political weather vane in that episode. His behavior around that episode, I think, is troubling. I just think it was flat wrong.
Yeah.
He came out that day, condemned the attacks, said Biden won, and then he immediately went flying to Trump. Seemingly, as soon as he realized the base wasn't going to abandon Trump, he just went flying back to him. And I think that stains his reputation to this day, and it's going to stain how people remember him. And then we did talk about him last month. Unfortunately, we didn't know he was going to die, but you said there were some conspiracy theories after he died, and some of them, some people speculating about who might have called the police and all that, because we referenced some of the rumors that have been around him for a long time in D.C. because he never married and had no children. For what it's worth, I kind of always thought those rumors were silly. But so we have talked about him a couple times, not really in any positive context. And I was really kind of surprised that after he passed, as you noted, there were a lot of kind notes. There were a lot of tributes. There were a lot of people talking about, he was charming. He could be a Southern gentleman and these sorts of things. And some of that is that's what happens when someone dies, right? But as much as I disliked him, as much as I would probably stand by the word I used in the second episode, I actually found some of those posts kind of changed my opinion a little bit. Yeah. And I think they are an interesting counterpoint to what we're talking with the Democrats, because what a lot of people are saying is, yeah, look, he was flexible. Yeah. And some people have said, look, his behavior around Trump is terrible, but he was a politician through and through. He was making compromises because he wanted to be in the room. I guess putting it that way actually perhaps made it a little more understandable, as opposed to it just being about his power, right?
Right, yeah. He was Trump's de facto Secretary of State. He listened to him the most when it came to foreign affairs and foreign matters. And I think it was Bill O'Reilly said that anything got to do, kind of with Ukraine and, defending American interests against China in particular. Trump leaned on Graham quite a lot. He was,
right.
He was the main guy for foreign affairs, and
he had a very big voice. And to your point, it's worth pointing out, he died after flying back from Ukraine, where he was announcing a pretty significant win in terms of getting American support for that. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was, and he did have a voice that Trump listened to, let's say.
Well, yes, and that goes to the nub of the main conspiracy theory, isn't it? That he just flew in from Ukraine and he died.
Yeah.
Okay. And he was 71. Apparently there was no, he had no health issues or all the rest and all that kind of thing. But he was a man that gave up his principles for power at the end of the day, Vincent. And that was quite naked when it came to January the 6th, wasn't it?
That would have been my interpretation a week ago. Kind of just pure. No, he just did this purely for power, purely to be the guy in the room. We'll put it on our Substack. Fred Kaplan at Slate, who we've cited before, a really wonderful writer. He wrote about essentially the debate over how you view him. And he had a couple quotes in there. And other people had quotes from Graham as well, in which he's surprisingly candid about the fact that being called by the president is pretty cool. That there is something to do that. And he has kind of said, look, yeah, you do that stuff because, when the president's calling you, instead of you just hoping desperately to get an audience with the president for 8 minutes every 6 months or whatever it is, yeah, it matters. The people defending him, I think, make a reasonable point that he did those compromises, as gross as some of them are. I mean, and there's also, of course, the famous, the 2015, 2016 flip-flop. His tweet that will go down in infamy is, right, if we nominate Trump, we will get destroyed and we will deserve it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Seen 110 million times or something like that.
Yeah, but the people defend him say, look, he was doing this in service of something they believe, which, as you said, was a very, very strong belief in the power of American exceptionalism, interventionism, the power and the necessity of American foreign policy to reshape the world. Some of our listeners, I think, would find that belief somewhere between wrong and just abhorrent. But I do think what they were saying it did honestly change my mind a little bit. It does seem weird to say, oh, well, if you make these compromises just to be in the room, you're an but if you make these compromises in service of something greater, then, oh, well, that's actually being a politician. It's an interesting framing, right? If you could get him to speak honestly about January 6th, you say, what am I supposed to do? Right? I'm supposed to go out there and grandstand for 3 years about how this was the worst thing ever. Trump stinks and he's awful. And then I get primaried and some other, is in the seat and they don't have the power when Trump gets elected, particularly in light of these purity tests on the left that we discussed around the Platner campaign. It really brings into relief sort of what politics is and how much a good politician can do and what they have to do to accomplish anything.
Vincent, I wrote an article about principles during the week and how politicians have been pragmatic in Northern Ireland in trying to deal with their principles when 20 years ago there would have been firebrands and lynchings and bonfires.
Right.
And to be successful in politics, you have to give up some of your principles somewhere along the lines. But he did so in such a naked manner on January the 6th, that's his unforgivable sin. That's what he will be remembered. That's all he will be remembered for.
Yeah, I think that might be right. Yeah.
His obituary will be, the final paragraph in his obituary will always reference January the 6th. His Wikipedia page will always reference January the 6th. Some politicians get very lucky in life to get remembered for nothing.
Yeah.
They go through life, they represent their constituencies, they earn a few bob, they get a good pay packet, the wife is happy, the kids go to a nice school, life is good, and some politicians get January the 6th on their tombstone.
Yeah. But those politicians are also the politicians who fly home from Ukraine with a win for a cause that they believe in. I think that's, again, I'm playing devil's advocate, perhaps literally here.
Yes, no, of course you're right. He's a multifaceted character. Yeah. A man that's never married, lurid allegations hanging over his head, behaved very nobly in some parts of his career and quite ignobly in other parts of his career. But it's the ignoble people will remember. Now, I will finish this. I think we should finish this about Lindsey Graham, Vincent. Okay?
Yep.
An article by Richard Fontaine in the Atlantic magazine. Did you see that article about Lindsey Graham?
I did not. I read a good amount of stuff, but that one I missed. No.
There was one paragraph. I like a good paragraph in an article that sucks you in. And Lindsey Graham talks to Richard Fontaine, and we linked the Atlantic article in our Substack. I won't do the good old Southern boy accent. I'll do my plain old Cork accent. But Lindsey Graham said, when I was first elected to the House, I looked for the they who run things, they who know how things really work, they who know what they're doing, but I couldn't find the day. After that, I went to the Senate, but there was still no day. And then I started to get invited to the White House and closed-door briefings and to meetings with top officials. There was still no day. I couldn't find the day. What I finally realised is that there is no day. There's only we, and we usually don't know what the we're doing. And I think, Vincent, that sums up a terrible amount of politics, and it does not matter whether if you're in the United States of Ireland or the United States of West Cork. I think that paragraph just sums up politics so much, doesn't it?
So much, yeah. Yeah, and that's what a perfect way to end. I think that's a great encapsulation of Graham's career and why he's such an interesting juxtaposition against what we talked about during the Platner story.
Okay, folks, if you're looking for a hire consultant to look after your entry into the American political market, reach out to us on Substack. Because you guys in the United States clearly haven't a Scooby-Doo what you're doing, and there's no. And we myself and Vincent would be much cheaper as well, I mean that. I'm Tull from the Irish Politics Newsletter.
I'm Vince Martin. Thanks as always.
Thank you. Bye-bye.